Hey everybody, this is the mini lecture as promised on Dembroff, who wrote our chapter about sexual orientation and the topics that y'all requested. So there are 4 of them that I will discuss briefly. They are sexual druthers, behaviorism, dispositionalism, and then Dembroff's account of sexual orientation that she suggests, which is the very lengthy and wordy and jargony bidimensional dispositionalism. I know that this chapter is a little bit more complicated than some of our other chapters, so as I noted in the announcement for that week, if you struggled with this chapter a little bit, that's okay. It's pretty standard. So I'll go ahead and start with sexual druthers, and the way that Dembroff defines this for us is that sexual druthers refers to specific preferences of sexual partners within potential partners, like a potential partner pool, according to one's sexual orientation. So in line with one's sexual orientation, but then these more specific factors of attraction, such as height, hair color, body structure, tone of voice, etc. So in essence, sexual druthers is just another word for what we commonly refer to as someone's type, right? If you are a heterosexual person, then you obviously are going to be attracted to people of the opposite sex/gender. And in that case, your sexual druthers would be separate from your sexual orientation. So it's important to note that Dembroff sees sexual druthers as not being something we should account for in our definition of sexual orientation. So once you have determined your attraction based on whatever your sexual orientation is, within that pool of partners, then if I am a woman who is attracted to both men and women, that's my sexual orientation, then my sexual druthers come into play. My type comes into play. So I may be attracted to people with a certain hair color, people with a certain eye color, people with a certain body type, people who maybe even dress a certain way, people who have tattoos, people who don't have tattoos. These are all examples of sexual druthers. And again, important to note that Dembroff notes that definitions of sexual orientation that already exist that she discusses do not take sexual druthers into account in their definition of sexual orientation, and her own definition does not take this into account. So these are types of attractions that we have that really have no bearing or influence on what our sexual orientation is. Then she defines for us basically 2 common approaches to defining sexual orientation. And the first is behaviorism. And behaviorism is going to be sort of exactly what it says it is. It's going to define one sexual orientation based on the sexual behavior that one engages in, the sexual activities that one participates in. Who, right, are you expressing attraction to, and who are you engaging in sexual activity with? And again, because sex and gender attraction are going to be what define our sexual orientations, this is going to be, right, which sexes and genders are you engaging in sexual behavior with? So it's going to be sort of your actions that determine your sexual orientation. Dembroff has problems with behaviorism, and she offers us 4 of them. The first is that she says that behaviorism doesn't take into account any kind of social pressure, social stigma, social mores that are going to perhaps limit the way that we are comfortable expressing sexual attraction in any given society. So she says, for example, if there is going to be a society that is particularly anti-right homosexual behavior, that people who have homosexual attractions may not engage in that behavior due to social stigmas. So in that case, she says, okay, behavior alone is not good enough for us to determine sexual orientation. She also notes the instance of sex work, where sex is occurring for economic purposes. She says that people who engage in sex work may engage in sex acts with people of genders and sexes that they are not attracted to because it is an economic exchange that's going on. So she says again there that behavior alone is not going to be a good enough indicator of what a sexual orientation is. She also notes the instance of people who choose to be celibate. This is the case sometimes for people because of religious reasons, personal reasons, whatever. And if you are celibate, so you're not engaging in sex, she says that doesn't mean that you don't have a sexual orientation. So this is another objection that she raises to behaviorism. And then finally, she says that there are instances that you may find yourself in social scenarios where the potential pool of partners does not align with your sexual orientation. So she offers us the examples of being in prison, where oftentimes prisons are segregated by gender. And so your pool of sexual partners is often going to be same-sex, same-gender people. And you may engage in sexual behavior with those people within that particular setting. She offers a similar example of single gender boarding schools where the opportunity to engage in same-sex behavior is the only opportunity to engage in sexual behavior that one has. And so she says that because of these circumstances often that influence our sexual behavior or that can influence our sexual behavior, behavior alone is not a good enough indicator for determining sexual orientation. So her preferred approach and what she incorporates into her own definition is dispositionalism, which she defines as, let me scroll through my notes. An understanding of sexual behavior that is based on one's disposition to engage in sexual behavior with a certain class of persons. So basically, dispositionalism is who are we disposed to, inclined to engage in sexual behavior with, and who basically do we want to engage in sexual behavior with. So it's not going to be solely based on behavior like behavioralism is. So because this is more open, this is the reason that Dembroff prefers dispositionalism. And she proposes bidimensional dispositionalism. This is her account of sexual orientation. So this is going to have a number of things that she includes within her definition. So I'll outline those important ones for you. The definition that she offers us for bidimensional dispositionalism is an account of sexual orientation that is grounded in an individual's dispositions to engage in sexual behaviors under ordinary conditions. In other words, free from those situations that we talked about, like social pressure or stigmas, any kind of prison or boarding school situation where the sexual pool is limited, sex work, celibacy, etc. And this is her second part, which is grounded in what sexes and genders. That's the bidimensional part, is this reference to sex and gender. She's going to say sex attraction and gender attraction should be accounted for in definitions of sexual orientation. So what sexes and genders that individual is disposed to engage in sexual behaviors under ordinary conditions. And this I'm all taking from the outline that is posted for you to Canvas. So it's there for your review, because I know my reading of that was injected with commentary. So this means a few things, right? I'll kind of break this down. She says, one, this account, because it's a dispositionalist account, is not going to just be based on behavior. It's going to be who are we predisposed to interact with sexually. That's generally like, who are we attracted to, right? Who do we want to engage in sexual activity with? Under ordinary conditions, so without any of those celibacy, prison or boarding school, sex work, social stigma situations, so free from those kinds of barriers, right? In a sort of ideal situation, she puts it in another way. that we're going to engage with. Who are we predisposed to engage with under normal circumstances? And which is grounded in the sexes and genders that we are disposed to engage with. Because remember, in her whole long spiel about sexual druthers, she's going to say, ultimately, we're defining sexual orientation based on sex and gender attraction. And so this definition that she offers us includes a few other points. She understands sexual orientation only in the terms of the sex and the gender of the persons that we are disposed to being attracted to. So in her definition of sexual orientation, our own sex and gender are irrelevant. So this means a number of things. A couple of terms that we use to commonly describe, sexual orientations as we understand them don't work under Dembroff's account. So the two that don't work anymore are going to be heterosexuality and homosexuality. And these don't work because if our own sex or gender is irrelevant in our definition of sexual orientation for Dembroff, then those definitions cease to make any sense, because the definition of heterosexuality is being attracted to people who are of the opposite sex, and the definition of homosexuality is going to be being attracted to people who are of the same sex. So both of those definitions have built into them requirements that we are defining the sex or the gender of the person having the attraction. It doesn't throw out two of your terms from Vernalis, which is bisexuality and pansexuality, because in bisexuality, it's defined as attraction to both men and women. Now, in that definition, no gender or sex is given of the person who's feeling the attraction, right? Same thing with pansexuality, attraction to people regardless of gender. The person that is feeling the attraction in that definition, that what their sex or gender is not relevant. So she notes that her proposed account of sexual orientation does require us to do away with a lot of very common, sort of deeply held concepts. And also, she doesn't know this quite so much, but for a lot of people, really important identity understandings. And so she notes that this is something that would require us to kind of throw out our current taxonomy of sexual orientation, our current understandings, and sort of start new. Because again, those really common terms like heterosexuality and homosexuality are no longer useful under bidimensional dispositionalism. So that the breakdown of those words again, the bidimensional bit is that she is including our attractions, both our sex attractions and our gender attractions in her definition of sexual orientation. And the dispositionalism is the same as the general definition for that term, which is that who we are disposed to engage in sexual activity with, who we have sexual attraction towards in ordinary conditions, is what determines our sexual orientation and not our behavior. So those are the 4 concepts that you asked for. If you want any more clarification on these concepts, I did post an announcement calling for any requests that you might have from either Vernalis, which was our chapter on bisexuality and bisexual marriage, or Break, which is our chapter this week on polyamory. If you want to go on to that announcement and in the comment section ask for further clarification on any of these topics, or on any topics that I didn't discuss today from Dembroff, please feel free. But remember, do it before Sunday at 11:59 p.m., please. So that's all for now. Till the next lecture video, I'm going to go throw up because that's all I do these days. So see you next time, and I hope that you all are well, and see you soon.